morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to be shockingly brief for a public official. I'm going to just very quickly, first of all, I want to thank Jennifer Schofield in particular for helping to organize this. She's done a great job. I want to thank you for your attendance. And I just wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit before we get on with our program, just about what was the genesis of this and why I think it's so important. My philosophy when it comes to public policy is that things are not truly public policy priorities unless you establish benchmarks and yardsticks and measurements and comparative measurements that can be commonly agreed upon and understood by both policymakers and the general public. And that's what I believe we're missing when it comes to discussions about Lake Erie, about the centrality of Lake Erie, its importance to the future of Greater Cleveland, to the health of Lake Erie, all of those issues. There is widespread consensus that it's important, but we don't exactly know how to measure its progress or its degradation from year to year. And that's what this process seeks to do. We are not seeking to control the dialogue, control the outcome, control the policy decisions that are made, because there are multiple agencies and entities. You have the private sector's interaction with Lake Erie. You also have multiple divided sectors in the nonprofit world and the public sector. So you have the Port Authority, you have the sewer district, you have the state of Ohio, you have county government, you have city government, and this doesn't presume to tell them how they should behave. But we are, as opposed to trying to control the dialogue, we're just trying to convene the dialogue. Now, where did that come about when it comes to the county's role in all this? And I do want to just set the stage with that a little bit. So when the new county government took office in January of 2011, our initial priority and our ongoing primary responsibility is running the core functions of county government. The human services functions that we do, the tax appraisal and collection processes, the public safety role that we play, all of those things. And those are our core responsibilities. So in a $1.3 billion budget, which is roughly what our operation is comprised of, that's what we're spending 90% of our time plus doing. But as we started to come out of the scandal and just trying to fix the dysfunction that had afflicted county government previously, we started to look at bigger issues. But even before I get to that, the methodology that we used to fix our own problems was based in data, particularly qualitative comparative data. So as opposed to just saying, is county government improving in 2011 compared to the way it was run in 2010 or 2009, we're always comparing, through this process that we call LakeStat, we're comparing our own operations to best practices. So we look at staffing numbers, we look at different performance measures depending on what the individual department is for every single department and every single function of county government. And we don't just look at what we did last year or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We do look at those things, but we look at what's the Pittsburgh area doing, what's the Detroit area doing, what's Franklin County doing, what's Hamilton County doing, Lucas County, Montgomery County, and then we look nationwide. And we're truly trying to synthesize what the best practices are. It's the number one thing that we think is missing when it comes to the administration of local government. There's a startling and shocking lack of discipline when it comes to kind of the professionalization, I think, of policy choices in local government. It's very anecdotal, quite frankly. I saw that both as a mayor and now as a county executive. Are there best practices out there? Yes, there are. Does it mean that day in and day out that's the way most large bureaucracies are run? No. Most of them are based on what happened last year and the year before in their own entities, not what is the rest of the country doing and what is the accepted best practice. There's also, there are national resources to go to try to figure out best practices in different areas, but it is not done in, again, a very disciplined or focused way. There's not a user's manual for county government. And there's also not a user's manual for how a major metropolitan area should maintain its natural assets, such as a freshwater lake. And that's what we're trying to establish here. We're trying to use that same philosophy that we used for the reform and improvement of county government, and we're trying to now apply that stat philosophy, which again we call county stat when we're just dealing with county operations, and we're trying to apply it to other public policy areas. Now, which ones have we focused on? Well, we've started to have that kind of discussion when it comes to public health. And that's, I think, instructive about the process we're going through today. So about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, we started convening people around different public health issues. So we had this Healthy Cuyahoga initiative where we started to bring together folks that had worked in different sectors of public health. I know some of them are here today, so you know what I'm talking about. And what was startling to me about that was some of those folks had been working in public health for a number of years, but had never talked about how the missions of their separate organizations could be aligned and could coordinate with one another. Now, some of them had, but not all of them had. And we've seen this same pattern repeat itself, for instance, when the county proposed on the economic front a mutual agreement between suburbs when it comes to economic development, a business attraction and no poaching agreement. Again, we had the same phenomenon that we saw, where you've got 59 different communities and you had people that sometimes had been working for decades in economic development in their own communities in the same county and had never met each other before and had never talked with each other before. Now, we couldn't control for them, or we couldn't by fiat say this is what you should do in order to coordinate your policies, but at least we could convene them and we could help establish, which we did through the agreement which all 59 communities signed, we could at least get them to agree kind of on rules of engagement, and we could also make sure that they were having those regular conversations. Very, very, very important in order to have, I think, rational coordinated policy as time goes on. So the question is, what other areas of public policy does it make sense for us to try to be, again, not the administrator, but a convener of interested parties so that we can get some consensus on what policy should be? And secondly, how do we establish benchmarks, commonly understood, publicly communicated benchmarks about how we're doing? And what other policy areas does it make sense? And we think extending the same philosophy to our greatest local natural resource, which is Lake Erie, makes sense. And that's what this whole effort is designed to do. What I'd like to see come out of this is a couple things. Number one is that there are stronger bonds of communication between all the folks that are represented here. We have a fantastic turnout, I think, of all the significant players when it comes to Lake Erie in the future, which I think everybody here would acknowledge is one of our primary assets that we have to protect going forward. And it's underutilized and probably underappreciated, not by the general public, but I think underappreciated in terms of its prominence in public policy making. So that's number one, to strengthen those bonds. Number two is hopefully some consensus will come out as we have sequels to this about what actual policies either we can implement separately or in a coordinated fashion, or that we can advocate either at the state level, regional level, or national level. And these kind of conversations, I think, will help with that. And then thirdly, we need to think about how, again, because if you think about it, again, it's not just county government, it's the port and the sewer district and all of the players that are represented here from both the, again, nonprofit sector, private sector, public sector. How are we communicating with our separate constituencies about what the lake means, what the lake could be, what it should be, and what are, again, the performance measures for evaluating how we're doing? So when we see a story in the paper about algae blooms, let's say, how do we place that in a context of saying, well, where are we compared to other freshwater bodies across the globe. Where are we compared to 5 years ago, 10 years ago? And I can't stress that enough, because if you think about it, in so many other areas of public policy, we take that for granted. If somebody talks about the national economy, you would never have a discussion about the economy without talking about the unemployment rate. You would never have a discussion about how we're doing economically unless you were going to talk about interest rates or the poverty rate. Those are the accepted kind of criteria that now they may be flawed, by the way, and they are flawed, because none of them truly capture the whole picture. But it's essential to have kind of this common language that we can start speaking about when it comes to dealing with Lake Erie. It also, I think, helps because when we make progress, and I'm optimistic that we will, and there are a lot of very positive things happening, we can communicate that to the public in a way that will engender public confidence instead of cynicism. One of the things I think that, I don't want to just call it the environmental movement, but the focus on environmental issues, one of the challenges that they've had is sometimes the problems seem intractable, and that leads to passivity because people don't feel like they're ever making progress. There's been enormous progress in on a number of different fronts, and we have to communicate that in a common language that all of us collectively can use. I shouldn't leave also without telling you that we are doing other things in county government that I think are pointing us in the direction of the lake. So whether it's hosting something like this today, but also where we're putting our dollars. We're increasingly trying to focus our dollars on lakefront development. The announcement that was made by Mayor Jackson and I a few weeks ago about the Convention Center Hotel and the redesign and renovation of Public Square and the other public spaces. There was a lot of good press coverage about it, which we appreciated, but it's not just a downtown development project. It's also a project that links the city with the lake in a way that's never been done before. And if you look at it in its totality, if you look at everything that's been proposed, both on the city side, the county side, and what we're talking about doing jointly, you're talking about, for the first time really in Cleveland's history, having downtown Cleveland and the metro area really connected to the lake. Now, that brings opportunities, but it also means that human interaction with the water, which we want, also creates issues. And we've got to start talking about that now. It would be great to have more people living and working and interacting with the water on a daily basis. We want to see that, but we also know that when that interaction happens, there's challenges, there's water quality challenges. We need to start talking about those things now and framing that issue. So I hope that today we can meet those goals that I mentioned, but also that hopefully at the end of today's sessions, you can make a resolution, not just of things that we agree on, but also that we should agree that this kind of discussion is something that we should renew. We should have sequels to this as we begin, hopefully, our inevitable migration northward. So thanks for your attention, thanks for your participation, and I hope you find this productive today. Thanks very much.